Ever had that moment? You're sitting there, maybe after a tough exam or maybe a social thing just went weird, and suddenly your own mind is just laying into you.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like a gentle nudge, right? It's this harsh voice just saying, you messed up. You're not smart enough. Why are you so awkward? We've all been there. That feeling just beating yourself up when you're already feeling low.
Definitely. It's a really common experience.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive right into that feeling, and maybe more importantly, how to start transforming it. We're digging into a really powerful idea from Kristin Neff's book, Self-Compassion, the proven power of being kind to yourself.
Great book.
Yeah, specifically chapter 3, which is called Being Kind to Ourselves. So our mission for you, especially if you're navigating, the pressures of college, is to really unpack why being kind to yourself matters so much and give you some practical ways to actually do it.
Right.
Neff talks about 3 main things for self-compassion: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Today, we're really zooming in on that first one, self-kindness.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is how much this goes against the grain, culturally speaking. It really challenges a deep-seated norm for a lot of us.
How so?
Well, we're usually pretty good at offering kindness to others, right? A friend messes up, we're there for them. But when it's us, that kindness often just evaporates.
Yeah, it vanishes.
We tend to reserve our toughest judgments for ourselves. So today we'll get into the psychology, even the biology behind why self-kindness is so vital. And then, like you said, the how to actually build that skill.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Self-kindness, what is it, really? At its core, it's about offering ourselves the same warmth, the same understanding, gentleness, really, that we'd naturally give a friend.
Exactly.
Now think about it, like if your roommate completely bombed a presentation, you wouldn't tell them they're useless, right? You'd offer some comfort.
Of course not.
But when we stumble, boom, out comes that internal club to beat ourselves up with.
That metaphorical club. It feels very real, though.
It does. And our culture, especially here in the West, often pushes this kind of, John Wayne stoicism, this idea that you got to be tough, suck it up, handle your suffering silently.
Right, bottle it out.
And be really hard on yourself to get better. But Neff argues that's actually, counterproductive.
Yeah.
Self-kindness is about actively stopping that constant self-judgment, that negative commentary running in the background.
Inner critic.
Exactly. It's looking at our own foibles and failures, as she puts it, our human slip-ups with understanding, not condemnation. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's not just stopping the judgment. It's more active than that. It's actively comforting yourself. It's like pausing when things are genuinely difficult. Maybe you got a grade back that you're really disappointed in, and asking yourself, okay, this feels really hard right now. How can I actually care for myself in this moment? It's an active offering of warmth.
So it's a positive action, not just stopping a negative one.
Precisely. Neff tells this really relatable story from high school. First date, big crush, she had a cold. Tried to be funny and, had a snot bubble incident.
Mortifying.
Oh, no.
Cringeworthy.
Totally. And she talks about the intense shame, the relentless self-criticism, calling herself lame for weeks. She wished she'd known about self-compassion then, you know, to treat herself kindly instead of just attacking herself internally.
Yeah.
And I think we can all relate, maybe not the snot bubble exactly, but those small, embarrassing things, tripping in the lecture hall, sending that email with a typo to a professor that our inner critic just blows way out of proportion.
Absolutely. Those moments can feel huge, even if they're objectively small. Her story really highlights that, and that really leads to a key question. Why is it so hard for so many people to be kind to themselves? Why do we resist it or feel like it's, impossible?
Good question.
Well, for some, it almost feels wrong, like you're letting yourself off the hook somehow. Maybe they got messages growing up that self-criticism is what motivates you or it's the right way to be.
Like it's necessary for improvement.
Exactly. There's this underlying belief that only harsh judgment works. But the really profound insight here is that being kind to yourself isn't just possible, it's actually, easier than we think. Because it taps into something fundamental, something innate in us as mammals, this capacity for care.
And that's it, isn't it? It's not just some nice philosophical idea. It's biological. Our brains, our bodies, they're literally wired for care. It's not only about fight or flight. There's also this crucial tend and befriend response, our instinct to connect, to nurture.
Right. Think about the mammalian attachment system.
Yeah, like unlike reptiles that are pretty much independent from birth, mammal babies are born incredibly vulnerable. They need intense care from parents to survive. Our brains are designed for that giving and receiving care.
It's baked in.
Totally. That capacity for affection, comfort, connection is a core biological blueprint.
There's that classic research by Harry Harlow. Controversial, maybe, but really telling.
The monkey experiments, right, from the 50s.
Yeah. He studied baby monkeys separated from their mothers, and he basically asked, would they prefer a wire mother that gave milk, or a soft cloth mother that offered only comfort?
And the answer was?
Unequivocal.
Hell.
The babies clung to the cloth mother. They only went to the wire one quickly for food.
Wow.
It showed so clearly that emotional comfort, that security, it's a fundamental survival need, just as vital as food. You know, man cannot live by bread alone.
Right.
Harlow's work really provided that groundbreaking evidence for the biology of our attachment system.
Okay, so comfort is as important as food, biologically speaking.
Essentially, yes. And then the psychologist John Bowlby, he took these ideas and applied them to humans. He talked about how infants develop an attachment bond with their parents.
Secure versus insecure.
Exactly. A secure attachment happens when needs are consistently met with love and support. The child learns to trust, sees the world as safe, uses the parent as a secure base to explore from.
Makes sense.
But if that support is inconsistent or cold, the child develops an insecure attachment. They can't fully trust others to soothe them. The world feels unsafe. And that pattern can affect confidence and relationships way into adulthood.
Right, I've heard about that.
Bowlby argued these early experiences shape our internal working model of ourselves. It's like this unconscious blueprint of who we are, whether we feel worthy of love, what we expect from others.
So early life really matters here.
Deeply. Securely attached people tend to feel worthy, expect support. Insecurely attached people often grapple with feelings of unworthiness, insecurity. And our research links directly to this. People with insecure attachment tend to have lower self-compassion.
That makes sense. If you couldn't rely on others for care.
It becomes harder to rely on yourself for that same care.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Right.
but here's the hopeful bit, right?
Yeah.
These internal models, they're not set in stone.
Not at all. That's the really good news. They can change. Things like loving relationships, good therapy. They can be powerful catalysts. They can help someone gradually feel worthy, learn to trust again.
That's huge.
But Neff adds a really crucial point here. We don't only have to rely on others for this shift. When we consistently give ourselves that nurturance, that understanding, we also start to feel worthy and safe. We learn to trust that there's always a reliable source of care available.
From inside.
Yes.
From within.
It reminds me of that story Neff tells about Emily, the dancer. Every time that insecurity bubbled up or the self-criticism started,
Yeah.
she would just silently repeat to herself, I love and accept myself exactly as I am.
A mantra.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a magic wand, but doing it consistently allowed her to handle some really deep grief from childhood rejection without getting totally overwhelmed. And eventually she rebuilt trust, built loving relationships.
That's powerful.
For any student dealing with self-doubt, that internal shift, that consistent practice, it's a really potent idea.
Absolutely. It shows the potential for internal transformation.
So let's talk chemistry. What's actually happening in our bodies when we do this? We're talking about the chemicals of care, right? Exactly. When we practice self-kindness, we're consciously tapping into that mammalian caregiving system you mentioned, and that triggers the release of oxytocin.
Oxytocin, okay? The love hormone, the bonding hormone.
You're right. It gets called a lot of things. It's vital for social connection. But what it does is increase feelings of trust, calm, safety, generosity, even connectedness, and importantly, it fosters warmth and compassion for ourselves.
So it directly fights stress.
It does. It reduces fear and anxiety, directly counteracting the stress response. It's interesting, some researchers even think the effects of MDMA or ecstasy might mimic oxytocin, that feeling of relaxedness, love, acceptance.
Huh. Interesting parallel.
Yeah. And while oxytocin is definitely released through things like hugs, social interaction, Neff stresses that our thoughts and emotions directed inward. They have the same physiological effect.
So thinking kind thoughts towards yourself literally changes your body chemistry.
Precisely. Self-compassion is a powerful internal oxytocin trigger.
Okay, so that's the kindness side. What about the opposite? Self-criticism.
Well, that's a totally different chemical story. When we're harsh on ourselves, we activate the amygdala, the brain's threat detector.
Fight or flight kicks in.
Right. Your body gets flooded with stress hormones like adrenaline, cortisol. This system evolved for physical threats, lion chasing you.
Right, not for, I messed up that presentation.
Exactly. But it gets activated just the same by emotional attacks, even the ones coming from inside our own head.
Yeah.
And chronically high cortisol, that's not good long term. It can contribute to things like depression by messing with neurotransmitters.
Yes. Oh.
And there's actual brain scan evidence for this. fMRI studies looking at how people react to personal failure.
What did they find?
When people imagined reacting with self-criticism, the parts of the brain involved in error processing, problem solving, like the lateral prefrontal cortex, the planning center, they lit up. Like the brain was trying to fix the problem of you.
Okay.
But when they imagined reacting with self-kindness, different areas activated, areas linked to positive emotions, compassion, empathy, like the left temporal pole.
Wow, so it literally shifts your brain activity.
It does. It shifts us from seeing ourselves as a problem to be fixed to seeing ourselves as, well, valuable human beings worthy of care. It helps us feel safe, calm, secure, and that frees us up from fear, lets us pursue our goals more confidently.
That brain evidence is really striking. Okay, so we've got the why, the biology, the psychology. Let's get practical. How do we actually do this? What are the steps we can take?
Right, the actionable stuff.
First up, Neff suggests exercise 1, hugging practice. Sounds maybe a bit silly, but hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
When you're feeling tense or sad or you're really caught up in that self-criticism, try just giving yourself a gentle hug. Fold your arms across your chest, give a little squeeze, or even just gently stroke your arm or your face.
Physical touch, but self-directed.
Exactly. Our bodies respond instinctively to physical warmth and care, like a baby being held, right? That physical touch releases oxytocin, provides a real, tangible sense of security, and calms down that stress. You can try it right now, even subtly if you're out somewhere. Just rest a hand gently on your arm. Notice how your body feels after. Maybe a bit warmer, softer, calmer.
It's surprisingly effective, actually.
It is. It's amazing how easily you can tap into that system.
Yeah.
Neff suggests doing it several times a day for a week or so just to build the habit. It's simple, direct, immediate kindness.
I like that. Simple and direct.
So beyond touch, the other big piece is changing that critical self-talk. This is where we get highly pragmatic, as Neff says. We can't always control our circumstances, right? Especially in college, things get hectic. But we can control how we respond to our own limits, our own mistakes.
That's where our power lies.
Yeah. And Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote Nonviolent Communication, he talks about using sympathetic language with ourselves, reframing that inner chat with empathy for our basic human needs. He has these 4 simple questions.
Okay, what are they?
1, what am I observing? 2, what am I feeling? 3, what am I needing right now? And 4, do I have a request of myself or someone else?
Observing, feeling, needing, requesting. Got it.
Let's try it with a college scenario.
Yeah.
Say you pulled an all-nighter, desk is a disaster zone, coffee cups everywhere.
Been there.
Right. And the inner critic instantly goes, you're so disorganized, you'll never catch up, you're failing. Okay, apply the questions. 1, observing, my desk is messy, I'm sleep-deprived, my brain's foggy. 2, feeling, overwhelmed, exhausted, frustrated, maybe anxious about the next thing.
Okay.
3, needing, I need rest, I need clarity, I need a sense of order to focus. 4, request. I request that I take a quick 15-minute nap, then spend 10 minutes just tidying my immediate space.
So it shifts from blame to needs and action.
Exactly. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about validating your needs and moving forward kindly.
That makes a lot of sense. And it ties right into the second exercise, which is explicitly about changing your critical self-talk. This one's more of a long-term blueprint, right?
No.
Good for journaling or just internal dialogue.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay, step 1 is just notice the self-critic. Become really aware of when that inner judge pipes up. What words does it use? Is it, you're so stupid? Is it, you're disgusting? What's the tone of voice? Does it sound like someone from your past? Really get to know it.
Become aware of the pattern.
Exactly. Step 2 is soften the voice with compassion. And this is key. You don't judge the critic itself. That just adds another layer of criticism.
Right, don't criticize the critic.
Instead, speak to it with understanding. Like you might say internally, okay, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me or motivate me, but the way you're talking is actually just causing pain. It's not helping. So please just stop.
Acknowledge its misguided intention, then redirect.
Precisely. And step 3 is reframe the observations kindly and positively. Ask yourself, what would a truly compassionate friend say right now? Maybe use a term of endearment if that feels okay for you, sweetheart, dear one, whatever. So instead of you're disgusting for stress eating, it might be, darling, I know you ate those chips because you're feeling super stressed about that deadline. You just needed comfort. But now you feel kind of crummy. I want you to feel good, so how about we take a short walk?
Framing it with care and suggesting a positive action.
Yes. And again, combining this reframing with a physical gesture, hand on heart, stroking your arm that helps trigger the oxytocin, even if you don't feel kind immediately, acting kindly towards yourself can actually start to generate those feelings.
Fake it till you make it. Almost, but in a physiological way.
Kind of, yeah. The actions can lead the feelings.
And the real-world effects of this stuff,
Yeah.
they can be pretty significant, right? Like that study on people with chronic acne.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one. People with acne often deal with a lot of depression, shame, harsh self-judgment.
Understandably.
So researchers did this 2-week intervention. They taught participants specific ways to soothe themselves when feeling bad about their skin and how to challenge that inner critic. They used little cue cards with phrases like, "It's okay to feel upset about my acne right now."
Simple but direct affirmations.
Then things like, "I'd accept a friend in my shoes. I want to be that way to myself." They also directly challenged thoughts like, "People won't like me because of my skin."
So what happened?
The results were pretty amazing. It significantly reduced their depression and shame, sure, but it also reduced the physical discomfort, the burning, the stinging of the acne itself.
Wow, the mind-body connection right there.
Absolutely striking.
And connecting this maybe to a more personal level, Kristin Neff's own story in the book, My Story, To Err is Human. That feels like a really raw example of this journey.
It really is. She's incredibly candid about her own struggles with shame, guilt, feeling unworthy, especially relating to a past marriage where she felt she had to constantly change herself to be accepted. And then a later affair, which, while it opened her heart in some ways, also caused immense pain and triggered huge waves of self-judgment.
Right.
It was really at her lowest point, grappling with all that she discovered self-compassion. For her, it meant judging herself less, having compassion for her own childhood wounds, accepting the human limitations that led her to make those choices.
Accepting her own imperfections.
Yes. And her huge insight was that accepting herself kindly did not mean letting herself off the hook. It wasn't an excuse.
Right, that's a common fear.
But it was the opposite, actually. It allowed her to be more honest about the harm she'd caused, both to her first husband, John, and her partner, Peter. It enabled her to really learn from it all and even find understanding with Peter before he passed away.
Wow.
She realized that just relentlessly attacking herself internally, it was, in her words, a complete waste of time. Kindness was what brought the healing, the inner warmth, the peace, the stability. And that improved her current relationship with her husband, Rupert, too.
It's such a testament to how interchange ripples outward.
What a powerful message. It really hammers home that, okay, maybe we can't stop those initial judgmental thoughts from popping up. They just happen.
Right. The mind does what it does.
But we don't have to believe them. We don't have to let them define our worth. When we choose, consciously choose, to respond to our screw-ups, our suffering with kindness, that self-contempt just doesn't have the fuel it needs anymore. It starts to fade.
It loses its power.
Yeah. Change really is possible. And it seems like it's a direct path to more joy, more contentment, more resilience, especially facing all the stuff college throws at you.
Definitely.
So just to wrap up our deep dive today, self-kindness isn't passive. It's an active thing, comforting ourselves, offering warmth, understanding when things are tough. Our biology totally supports this attachment systems, oxytocin.
Yeah.
It's wired in. And we can cultivate it. Simple practices like a physical hug or reframing that inner critic with those empathetic questions.
Small actions, big impact. Right. It's a powerful tool for resilience. And Neff calls self-compassion this precious gift, always available. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to wait for someone else to be kind to you first.
It's always accessible within.
Just think about it.
Yeah.
Who is the only person in your life who is truly available 204/7 to give you care and kindness?
It's you.
It's you.
That's beautifully put. And it really leaves us with the final thought, doesn't it? Given that our bodies, our minds are inherently wired for this capacity for care, what new possibilities might open up for you right now if you consciously choose to activate that self-kindness, especially when you're facing a big challenge?
Something to really sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you'll reflect on these ideas, maybe try one of the exercises this week, see how it feels. Until next time, be kind to yourself.